Hello, this is assignment 3, so lesson implementation and reflecting on that lesson. So the context of my lesson is it was a Year 7 science class called 7B. So the unit is classification and the topic is scientific naming. So it's the last lesson of the unit. The students have already learnt about dichotomous keys, classifying things based on whether they're living, non-living or dead, and the taxonomic classification system. So it was on the 24th of May, which is the third week of my teaching rotation at Mornington Secondary College. And the reason we are teaching it is because scientific naming is a method of classifying organisms, which is the unit of biology that they're in. So what I aim to achieve is that all students would understand what scientific naming is and how it is used. They would understand why scientific naming is used and understand that scientific names have meaning. So the last two objectives I used constructivist approach to how I taught those. And the first one was predominantly taught by students taking notes from a slideshow, which is included in the lesson plan but not in this slideshow. So first I'll define constructivism. So constructivism is based around the idea that meaning is constructed by the learner. Constructivists believe that learners are both physically and mentally involved in the learning process and construction of knowledge and are therefore able to self-regulate their own learning process. Constructivists also believe that learners continually build cognitive structures or schema during the learning process, and these schema are continually developed when new information is introduced and connected to prior knowledge. So new understandings and knowledge are linked with old understandings and knowledge, which may change or build a student's understanding. Furthermore, an important component of the theory of constructivism is the social interactions with peers and adults that support the development of the learner. So how I use the constructivist approach. At the beginning of the lesson, I used the whiteboard and we did a brainstorm of the pros of nicknames versus formal names. So I had the students consider the benefits of nicknames and they came up with the fact that they're fun, you can use them with your friends, they're easy to say. And formal names, they came up with the fact that it identifies you from other people. You can have things sent to you in the mail, and your parents might say it to you if you're in trouble. So I then prompted students to understand the link between this brainstorm and the reason why we use scientific naming, likening common names to nicknames and scientific names to formal names. So it gave the students the ability to combine what they already know with the new knowledge that they're about to receive in a real-world context. The worksheet that the students did on scientific naming basically entailed students creating different scientific names for organisms based on their particular attributes. So they were given a table on Greek and Latin words and their English meaning, which was attributes of an organism. And students worked collaboratively with other students and bounced around ideas off each other to come to conclusions. At the end of the worksheet, the students were required to create their own organisms, so they had to come up with the different attributes of these organisms and then give them an appropriate scientific name according to the table. It enabled students to be more proactive about receiving that understanding of scientific names and the fact that they have meaning and purpose. So I responded to diverse learners during the lesson. When we did the pros and cons of nicknames versus formal names, I encouraged different students to contribute, and the more shy students, I encouraged them just to have a go, which they did, so that was good. When students did notes for the slideshow, which is the next 3 bulletin points, which is included in the lesson plan, I walked around and ensured all students had the information down, so slower writers were finished before I moved on. Some students were unable to see the slideshow, so I wrote some of the information in larger writing on the whiteboard. And we have one student who's autistic and can become quite distressed if he feels as though he's being left behind. So I made sure he was up to date before we moved on. And sometimes he feels better if the slides are relayed orally to him. for him to then write them down. So I would relay some of the information to him that way. While completing the worksheet, I provided individualised support to students who were unsure of how to tackle the problem, and I found these students by constantly walking around and monitoring how students were going. And when I became aware that some students did not understand, I provided an example to the whole class, offering the opportunity to advanced students to convey their understanding, which was helping their learning, and then foundation students were able to attain a different explanation. So to reflect on my lesson, I measured the learning experience by questioning students of their prior knowledge and their understanding. I walked around and ensured students had written all of the notes in their PowerPoint, and I walked around and looked at individual students' worksheets and the answers that they had achieved and provided feedback. The pros of the lesson: students seemed to understand the prior knowledge quite well and engaged in the discussion at the beginning with enthusiasm. The direct instruction and slideshow at the beginning provided a good foundation for them completing the worksheet, and they seemed to understand the objectives quite well. Most students understood the connection between scientific naming and the taxonomic levels. Most students found the worksheet to be quite fun and completed it enthusiastically, particularly the part at the end where they were able to create their own organisms. Students seem to grasp a great understanding that scientific names have meaning. And then the cons: some students found writing the notes on the slideshow to be quite mundane. Some students did not grasp the connection between scientific naming and the taxonomic levels, so I could have reiterated this connection on the whiteboard. Some students were quite confused by the worksheet at the beginning, which took the exercise away from student-centred focus and became a bit more teacher-directed. So I could have gone over an example straight away at the beginning to avoid this. And there wasn't enough time to discuss all of the answers at the end, so this would have been had to occur in a successive lesson. These are my references.